Hey, welcome along everyone. Thank you for tuning in again to our third online lecture that we've produced. The first two, the Amazing Astronomy and the Force Be With You, were very focused on physics. Today's lecture is stepping into more the world of biology now, where we're going to be learning about mutations, how they can help animals to survive, and their role in natural selection as well. So today's lecture should run for about 30 minutes. You can pause and restart anytime throughout this if you want to. There will be some extension activities available afterwards if you'd like to log into the CUA portal or the CU Australasia website as well, so you can get some more hours in your passport. To evidence today's lecture, we just need you to copy down the following. These are some jumbled words, which throughout this lecture you're going to get the solutions to. So each set of letters you see there are a jumbled up name of an animal that I'll either discuss or there'll be a photo of during the lecture. So you'll be able to see that and you'll be able to write the unjumbled version of the word next to it. Once you've solved all of these, you can take that to your in-school CUA coordinator as the evidence of your learning, and they can fill your passport in from that. So I'll give you a few more seconds just to finish these off. If you do need a little bit more time though, feel free to just press pause and then press start again, and you'll be able to tune right into where we were. So before we get talking into mutations, we really need to discuss DNA, because that is a very, very important part of the science we're going to be discussing. DNA is an abbreviation or a shortened version of the word deoxyribonucleic. See, even I messed it up. Deoxyribonucleic acid. So DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. It's probably a little bit hard to explain at a primary school level what DNA exactly is, but I think the best way that I understand it is, well, DNA is what makes you you. It has all the information in it that makes you into what you're going to be. And it's not just humans. DNA is found in all living things. So all plants have DNA and all animals have DNA. Everyone's DNA is different, but within a species, DNA is largely the same with only a couple of small differences. But then there are differences between humans and chimps or humans and cats, that sort of thing. The different information makes it a different, well, living being. Another way to think about it, I guess, is that it's kind of like a script to a movie. If those of you that have ever seen a movie script, it's a really, really thick book with lots and lots of information in it about who the characters of the movie are, what they say, what they look like, how they behave, and you put all that information together and it creates one movie. So that's how I like to think of DNA. If you're the movie, your DNA is the script that made you into the movie that you are. Now, when you get your DNA, it doesn't just come out of nowhere. The DNA of an individual comes from its parents. So your DNA is a combination of your mum and your dad's DNA. So when two individuals create offspring or create a child, now in the case of human beings, their DNA is passed on, and it's passed on roughly 50-50. Now, it's not always passed on perfectly. For the most part, you might have been told in the past that you look like your mum or your dad, or you might even look like a grandparent, or you might have the same eye color as your uncle or auntie, and that's because within families, DNA is very, very similar. So your parents, their DNA came from their grandparents, and that's then been passed to you, so you do have a lot of your grandparents' DNA, for example. But every time that DNA is passed on, little mistakes happen. It's not always perfect, you don't look exactly like a 50-50 combination of your mum and your dad, and there are some little differences as well. We call these little differences or these little mistakes a mutation. Okay, they're not huge, they don't make huge changes to who you are as an individual, but they do lead to some small little differences in the offspring. What you've got in front of you is you've got a picture of a chicken with 7 yellow chicks behind it and a dog looking over it. So if we imagine that picture is a DNA, what story could that picture be telling us? That could be that the chicken's gone for a walk and to meet up with their friend, the dog. Okay, that's what we can take from that picture. The picture is kind of like the script, I guess, and it's told us the story of what's going on. But if we make some very, very small changes to the picture, it then changes the story that we're getting from it. So by adding under the chicken, we've got another colored chick here, and we've got a bee on the dog. Suddenly it's, well, maybe rather than just going for a walk and being watched over by the dog, this chicken, this could be the hen, for example, has gone along to meet a rooster, and she's brought along, and now she's got a black chick rather than just seven yellow chicks. And the dog, well, he's actually giving a ride to this bee that's riding on its tail. So even with only 3 changes to the picture, the story is completely different. Okay, well, not completely different, but different enough. And that's kind of how mutations happen. Even though there are only small changes to DNA, it can tell a very, very different story. If you want another example, you could probably create your own. Think about your favorite movie. And if the main character suddenly became an elephant, how would that change the movie? Think about that. And that's an example of how small little mutations can have some interesting changes, I suppose. Now, as X-Men taught us, talking about movies, as we go to the popular series X-Men, mutations aren't always bad. You know, in that movie, they talk about mutants and they talk about how they're, I guess, vilified in the community, and people think all mutants are bad. And the movie shows us, well, that's not the case. Lots of mutations or lots of mutants can really help us out. And that's kind of the way mutations work in the animal kingdom. Because some mutations, if they change a physical characteristic, well, they can actually make it easier for you to survive. And that's what we're going to go through over these next few slides. For animals to survive, they need 3 things. They need shelter, they need food, and they need water. And I think food and water are probably one of the more important ones for animals. They need to be able to consume a food source within their environment. So mutations that help them to do that are going to be really beneficial. Look at the tiger, for example. The tiger is a very powerful, very efficient carnivore. They eat a lot of meat, and they need to eat a lot of meat, so they need to be able to hunt big, strong animals, and they need to be able to eat that meat fairly quickly. So to be able to hunt large, strong animals and eat a lot of meat, they've evolved, they've had these mutations that have survived, have been ones that help them do that. So if you look at the wide open mouth there, a really, really big mouth can fit a lot of food in it. They've got some really, really sharp teeth that help them to rip meat off a carcass. And they've also got really, really strong jaws, which means they're able to clamp down on their prey to kill it. And then they're able to, again, rip that meat away with a really, really strong jaws in their mouth. So that's what's helped them survive. If tigers didn't have really sharp teeth, they probably wouldn't be as efficient at surviving. But the mutation that you need is very, very specific to your environment. On the right-hand side of the screen there, you've got an animal called the thorny lizard. Now that lives out in the desert, doesn't get much water. It's not going to come across a pond very quickly or a waterfall. So it still needs water to survive though. So it's actually had a mutation that's helped it out. And that is that this animal is able to absorb water or moisture from the ground up through its feet. It doesn't need to dip its head and use its tongue to drink water. It actually just absorbs it from the soil or from the ground around it up through its feet, and that travels into the animal system and it's able to take water in that way. So that's a really amazing mutation that suits a very, very specific environment. If the thorny lizard wasn't able to take up water through its feet, it probably wouldn't survive. Now, these are some examples there that you can think of, but I just want to show you also a demonstration that you might wish to do at your own home with your own pasta and utensils to show us how important the right way to eat or how important eating is, and how the, I guess, our physical features can help us to eat a little bit more efficiently. So I just want to show you that video. So just as a bit of a demonstration that you can do at home if you want to test this out for yourself to see how the shape of a mouth or a shape of an animal's beak can be so important, is we can do a little demonstration or a little activity where we take 3 different utensils from our kitchen and we pick some food sources and we see how much of that food we're actually able to pick up at one time. So for our first demo today, I've got 2, but the first one is it's a very small kind of pasta, so lots and lots of little ones could replicate maybe like a small little insect or something that you're trying to eat. And we've got our 3 utensils being our spoon, our fork, and a pair of tongs. So what we're going to try and do is, over 10 seconds, I'm going to see how much of this food I'm going to take from the environment and I can put into my stomach. So this empty plate is going to be my stomach, and I'm going to give myself 10 seconds. So I'll start off with a teaspoon, waiting for 10 seconds, and we'll go. So we're trying to scoop as much as we can from their environment and eat it. So we're doing fairly well here. 10 seconds, we got almost a full plate, so that's pretty decent, and that was fairly easy for me to do. So I think that's an animal that will survive very well in that environment. Next one will be the fork. It's not too bad, there's a little bit of pasta stuck on the edge there. So we've really about half of what we had for the spoon. So, I mean, that's an animal would probably be able to survive, but when it came down to who can eat quickest and who can eat the most in a short period of time to stay safe, I think the spoon still wins. What we'll do now, we'll just try out and see how the tongs go. I'll get them ready, wait for my timer, and I'll get going. How can I... Okay, timing is not bad. That wasn't very much. Oh, and that's time. So, and that's really less than both of them. So the really big tongs, a really, really big mouth, wasn't very effective at eating a very, very small food source. Now, just because in this situation, it sort of went, I think spoon was the best, followed by the fork, followed by the tongs. It is very dependent on what food is available. So if I change my food source now and I bring in something a little bit bigger, do we see a difference? So these are now a much bigger sort of shell pasta, and we'll see how we go. So I'll start off with my teaspoon again. Ready, and I'll go. Try and pick up one. So we'll call that 3. So that was 3 I was able to get in that period of time, but that was quite difficult, much harder than the small pasta. I'll move on to the fork now, see how I go with that. Now that was time there. That was also pretty hard to do. Had to kind of get inside and hook it. So the animals who've had a mouth like that, they might need to really think about how they go about their feeding. And for our last one, we'll try and go with the tongs. So these are the worst ones in the last environment. Let's see how they go. It's much easier. We can grab multiple at one time, pick them all up, and in 10 seconds virtually clear the plate. So in that example, I think the tongs were the best one by some distance. And so you can see how if an animal's in a different environment or if the food source changes, it can also benefit different animals. And of course, the animal that eats the most has the best chance of passing on its genes. So it is more and more likely that over time, there'll be more and more animals with nice big mouths or mouths that suit their environment. So I mentioned before that to survive in their environment, animals need food, they need water, and they need shelter. Now, for a human being, a shelter might be a house, it might be a tent if you're going camping, that sort of thing. Animals aren't quite so picky, but they still need a safe place to live, and part of that could be their natural environment. But the way they can make it safer is actually by camouflaging themselves or by blending into their environment. It could be safer or better for them if they're a prey species. That means that they are a species that is being hunted, because if they're able to camouflage or blend into their environment, they're harder to see for another species. That means they're less likely to be hunted and eaten. If they're an animal that is doing the hunting, they might want to hide themselves so that their prey can't actually see them coming. And that might give them a better chance to sneak up on an animal unsuspectingly and catch them and eat them. So whether you're a prey or a predator, you need to be able to hide and camouflage into your environment. We have some really interesting examples in front of us here, because it's not just land animals that want to camouflage. On the left-hand side of the screen there, you have a flounder fish. That's an animal that is eaten by other fish. So you can see there it's very, very well hidden. It wants to be able to blend in onto the rocks and things at the bottom of the ocean, so it can't be easily seen. And on the right-hand side, obscured a little bit by myself, but you have a copperhead snake. Now, you probably look at a copperhead snake and think it's a predator and it wants to be able to hide. And I guess that is true. Snakes do eat small mice and rats and things like that. And so they want to be able to sneak up on those sorts of animals. But the copperhead snake and all snakes really are also a bit worried about being eaten. They might be hunted by larger snakes, they might be hunted by birds, and so that's probably why the copperhead that you can see in the image there, it actually wants to blend into its surroundings as well. It's also a feature of snakes that make them quite dangerous for humans, because we all know about those of us in Australia anyway, we know about the danger of snakes during the summer, and we know that most snake bites occur because people accidentally step on a snake or accidentally come near a snake, and that often happens because the snakes are so well camouflaged. So yes, it can help an animal to both hunt or be hunted. As a bit of a demonstration onto how valuable being able to hide is, I want to do a bit of an example with you guys that you can work through yourselves. On this slide here, we've created just an orange environment. I mean, it kind of looks a little bit like that the desert we talked about for the thorny lizard earlier on, but that orange rectangle in front of you, that is going to be an environment. Now, what I'm going to do after the count of 3 is I'm going to give you 3 seconds to count out as many different species of animal on the next slide. And the way it's not an actual picture of an animal, what you'll see in front of you are lots of different colors of dots. Each color of dot will represent one animal species. So what I guess a better way to explain it would be, I'm asking that you guys in 3 seconds tell me how many different colors that you see. Okay, so I'm going to count to 3. I'm going to change the slide. I'm going to give it 3 seconds. Then I'm going to take the circles away. All right, on the count of 3. 1, 2, and 3. And gone. How many different colors did you see? All right, we'll bring the colors back so we can actually count through it and see what we had in front of us. So when we do much more time now, we can work our way through it. We can see blue, we can see purple, we can see green, we can see red, we can see yellow, we can see a bit of a brown, and we can, well, that's probably a bit of a half brown or maybe they're dark brown, and we can see light brown. So we can see there, that's 7 different colors. Were you able to pick up 7 different colors in your 7 seconds? If you were, that's fantastic. You must have amazing eyes. But if you weren't, can you think back which colors stood out to you the most? Which colors did you see? Did anybody's eyes get attracted straight to the brown, or did they go straight to the colors that stand out a little bit more, like the yellow or the red or the blue? Are those the ones that jumped out at you the most? If so, that is what we would expect to happen. Those are the colors that stand out the most with that orange background. So they're the ones your eyes were drawn to. Now, if you think that you're a hunter and you were looking for prey, your eyes would be drawn to those ones that stand out the most, which is why it's beneficial for animals to blend in so the eyes of the hunter aren't drawn onto it. Okay, moving on to the next way that animals can survive. And animals, yes, they do stay in their environments, but sometimes they need to move. You know, animals don't just sit perfectly still all day. They might need to, I guess if we're talking about a prey species, they might need to run away from an animal that's trying to hunt them. Similarly, if they're a hunter, they'll need to move very quickly so that they can catch animals. So if we look at the cheetah, that's known as a super fast animal, reaches incredibly high speeds, much faster than you or I. And that is because it's an animal that's evolved, or it's had mutations over time that have allowed it to run at very, very high speeds. Some of them are going to be really, really obvious when you look at the picture there. You can see the very, very long legs on a cheetah. It's actually quite thin. It's a quite slender animal, quite thin, kind of like a greyhound, but much thinner than your big cats like a lion or a tiger, because that makes it much faster as well, nice thin. It's got a really long tail, which helps it balance, but these are all external physical features that you can see. What the cheetah also has is inside its body, it's got some adaptations as well and some mutations that have helped it to move quicker. So cheetahs now all have very, very large hearts. And the heart is an important organ because it pumps the blood around your body and it gives your muscles the energy they need to be able to function. So the cheetah, it has a really, really big heart, so it can pump lots and lots of blood around the body. It can give the muscles lots and lots of energy so they can work so fast to make the cheetah a really, really, really fast runner. Without such a big heart, the cheetah wouldn't be as fast, and so it wouldn't be as efficient at catching animals in its environment. On the right-hand side of the screen there, we've got a sea animal, because, you know, adaptations don't just apply to animals on Earth or terrestrial animals. They apply to animals in the ocean as well. The turtle is an animal that we all regard as a pretty slow-moving beast, I suppose. The tortoise and the hare story we all know very well. On land, turtles are very, very slow, and they look a bit like a slow animal. When they get into the water, however, they're much better at traveling. And the reason for that is they've basically got 4 flippers. Any of you that are keen swimmers, if you've ever worn a pair of flippers on your feet when you've gone into the pool or into the ocean, you'll know that it's much easier because you're able to move so much more water. Turtles, even though they've got a fairly heavy body, they've actually got 4 flippers, 2 at the front, 2 at the back, which means they're able to push through the water much, much more efficiently and makes them much faster swimmers. And that might help them to eat. It might help them just to travel if they want to as well. So they've got that option too. So it depends very much on your environment. The same mutations that have benefited the cheetah would not benefit the turtle and vice versa. Now, as we're talking about this, you're probably thinking, well, does that mean every single time a mutation takes place, does it live on in that species? So all the species we see today, Is that evidence of all the mutations that have ever occurred? Is there a combination of that? And well, no, it's not. The only those mutations that will help an animal to survive. If there's a mutation that actually makes an animal less likely to survive, then it won't be passed on. So for example, if you think about our cheetah, if a cheetah evolved and had a mutation that actually gave it or shorter back legs, for example, so there was a cheetah that was born, it had a mutation, its legs were a little bit shorter, that cheetah would be unlikely to survive in its environment, which meant it was unlikely or unable to have its own offspring or have its own babies, which means it couldn't pass on that mutation. So really negative mutations or mutations that are harmful to the animal's chance of survival do not get passed on. Those that help the animal survive, those that are beneficial, means that the animals that have the mutation, so the really, really fast cheetahs, are more likely to survive, they're more likely to reproduce, and they're more likely to pass on those really, really long legs to their offspring. And then slowly over time, really, really long legs are seen throughout the environment. And I just want to go back to our 7 different colored dots to show that one more time. So we've gone back to our bit of an orange background, and we've got our 7 different species of animals. We've got our blue, we've got our purple, we've got our green, we've got our red, our yellow, we've got our, and this looks a bit different now, this is our brown, and we've got our orange. So we've got our 7 different species of animal. Now thinking back to the demonstration or the activity we did earlier on, which of these animals do you think are going to be hunted first? Okay, well let's have a look, see which ones do we think stood out the most. The first species we think to go was going to be, well that was the purple, was a really dark colour, very obvious, probably closely followed maybe by the blues, and then the yellows have gone, a couple of yellows have survived, but they don't survive too much longer, they'll go as well. And then we just have the last one for now to go with the green. So right away, 5 species that did not blend into their environment at all, they have been hunted, and hunted very efficiently. They're completely removed. None of those species, therefore, are able to reproduce. None of them are able to pass on their mutation that gave them that colour to other animals. So we're left with the red, the orange, and the brown. Now, these animals, I mean, the reds still stand out, but they're a little bit harder to see. Hunters aren't very good at catching them. But there's now a lot more space throughout the environment. So what do you think is going to happen to the populations of these 3 species of animal? Well, if you said you think they're going to grow, that's exactly right. They're not being hunted very well. There's lots of food and water and shelter available, so their numbers will increase and they will fill up that environment because they're able to live without being hunted. Over time, though, what will happen is the hunters will also improve. The hunters, with time, one of the hunters is going to have a mutation that gives it slightly better eyesight. And if it's got better eyesight, what it's going to be able to do is suddenly pick out the next species that stands out the most. Which one do you think stands out the most there? Did you say the reds? I hope you did, because I think that's the species now that the hunter has better eyesight. It can now see the red species, and it can hunt that too, and it can hunt it really, really well. And that means the reds have disappeared. Now, because that species of animal, that the hunter had good eyes, the mutation that gave it better eyes, because the hunter had better eyesight, or the animal that had better eyesight was able to hunt and was able to eat the red species, it had a better chance of survival, and therefore it had a better chance of passing on that mutation that gave it really, really good eyes. And so more and more of the species of hunter were born, and so which had good eyesight, which made them very, very efficient hunters. So now you're left with the 2 animal species that really blend in, really camouflage really, really well into their environment. Okay, the hunters can't see them because they're excellently camouflaged. So as we saw before, there's more space, there's more resources, they're not being hunted, they will also grow, and they will fill up that environment. So just because they're camouflaged though, and the hunters can't see them when they're camouflaged, does that mean that these animals are safe forever? Or could something else change? Well, in fact, and we haven't talked about it too much today, but behavior is also really, really important. Those of you with pets, you'll know that animals learn. They learn very, very quickly. And if an animal performs a behavior that maybe doesn't increase its chance of survival,
it might leave it open. So for the example here, if we look at what starts to happen, some of these animals, well, they're not so good at hiding and they start moving around a little bit more. Maybe the hunter is able to detect movement. So while it can't always see the color of the animal, it still camouflages very well, but the hunter is able to pick up movement the way that, say, snakes do through their tongues. So suddenly those animals that move around a lot, they exhibit a behavior that does not help them to survive. They're the next ones that get hunted. And then you're just left with those animals that are really, really good at camouflaging, but also have the proper behavior. They learn to stay still, they learn to hide or to shelter themselves especially well, and they have the best chance of survival. And what will eventually happen is the environment or the ecosystem will just balance itself out. There'll be enough food, there'll always be the odd animal that can be hunted, that can be eaten, that the predator is able to eat, so the predator is able to survive. But the predator isn't so efficient that it's able to wipe out entire species anymore. And both the predators and the prey, they live in balance in the ecosystem. And that's what happens. It occurs naturally in nature, and that is what we want to see, because that means there are as many species as possible surviving within that environment. Now, once again, as we did last week, we're going to give you the chance to ask some questions. With the things we've talked about today, you may have a question about a particular animal species. You may want to learn more about how a particular adaptation can help. So if you do have any questions, what we'll ask is that you put it in the comments section of the post for today. We'll have a look at it again by 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, and we'll try to get a response video out where we answer your questions. So if anything that I've said today you'd like some more explanation or you'd like to learn more about, feel free to put it in the comments and we'll get back to you. You've also got, I hope, there are a few solutions on the page here, but I hope you've been able to unjumble all those words we talked about at the start of today's lecture. So don't forget, once you've done that, to take it to your CUA coordinator, and you'll be able to get the time on your passport for that as well. And finally, there will be 3 extension activities that are available on the CUA website and the CUA portal for you to complete. I think those 3 are all worth half an hour as well. Thank you very much for tuning in again today. I hope you were able to learn something from today's lecture. Hope to get some questions and to speak to you again soon. Thanks very much. Bye.